Hi everyone, it's Jenny with Haphazard Book Nook, and today I am doing monster horror book recommendations. Alright, so for some of these monsters, I only have one or two recommendations for. One of them I have a bunch of recommendations for. I'm just going to go through the books that I've read relatively recently and tell you guys ones that I personally have liked. There is going to be one in here that I did not like, but I'm going to talk about it anyways, just in case it intrigued somebody else and maybe they want to read it. There are actually a couple of monsters I don't have recommendations for as well, and if you have horror recommendations for them, I would greatly appreciate it. One being dragons. I don't know if there actually is dragon horror books. I haven't really been able to find much on it. The next one is werewolves. There are a few out there that I am looking into reading. One is the one by Stephen Graham Jones, Mongrel. I'm not the biggest fan of Stephen Graham Jones, so I'm a little iffy on that one. I'm also looking into Such Sharp Teeth because I know that one a lot of people like as well. Alright, so I'm going to start with monsters that I only have one book recommendation for. So the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be a Mothman book. It is called Below by Laurel Hightower. So Below is about a woman who is really snowy out, but she's trying to get somewhere. So she ends up following a trucker because he has driven down the road before, and he's like more used to the snow and things. So she goes ahead and agrees to follow him, and while they're driving down the road, he goes off the side of the mountain, and her car basically like stops working, and so she tries to go down the mountain to try to save him because she has a radio and she can hear him talking, and she ends up getting lost in a cave system, and the Mothman is trying to show her the way out, sort of. So when I went into this book, I thought it was going to be a lot more like Mothman-esque, but it actually reminded me a lot of the movie The Descent. It's very, very similar, the kind of monsters that are in it, because there's not just the Mothman, there's other kinds of monsters in like the caves and stuff. And basically the actual Mothman helps her, which is what he does in his lore, but I was expecting him to be more of the monster that like goes after her when I was going into this book. Alright, so next is mermaids. So for this one, I am going to recommend Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I know that this one is a really popular book. A lot of people have read. It is about an expedition to a place in the middle of the ocean where another ship had its entire crew disappear, basically. They have some footage from it, but they don't believe that it's real because it showed killer mermaids basically murdering the entire crew. So a lot of people don't believe that it was actually real, and so it is an expedition trip trying to see if that actually was true, and basically what else could have happened if it was not. I also am looking into reading The Deep by Alma Katsu. I believe that it has some mermaids in it. I don't know. If you have any killer mermaid books, let me know. I've read a lot of like mermaid fantasy books or mermaid romances, but I haven't actually read much that are like killer mermaids, and I love under the water horror, so I'm like really intrigued into that. And then the last one that I only have one recommendation for is actually vampires, which I know is kind of strange because vampires, when people think horror, is one of like the biggest monsters. I really only have the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. It's about a group of women who run a book club, and a new guy comes to town, moves in, but he only comes out at night. Really, really weird stuff starts happening, and then he gets like really interested in their little group of friends, and it's about them trying to figure out if he's being super creepy, like wanting to attack them, if he is a vampire, what's happening to the kids that are going missing, different things like that. It's got a lot of really interesting scenes in it. There's one scene in a bathroom with rats that I will never forget it. It's one of the most vivid memories I have of that book. I haven't actually read, similar to Mermaids, many horror books based around vampires. It's mostly been like romances or different sort of like fantasy books. There is a book called In the Roses of Pieria that technically has vampires. I don't recommend it. I didn't really like that book, but it is a vampire book in case it is something that you are looking for. All right, so the next monster I am going to give recommendations for is kaiju, which isn't actually a technical monster. It is a category of monsters. Kaiju are like Godzilla or King Kong. They're super oversized versions of something. So my first recommendation is Supersize Island by J.J. Walsh. And in this book, the entire island has overgrown mutant animals. So there are rats the size of VW bugs. There are giant parrots that are like the size of a house, just different things like that. Like there's fish that are the size of actual like whole boats that aren't supposed to be, like angelfish that aren't supposed to be that big. And them trying to survive on the island. They were going there as a training exercise for a new company that the main character is a part of. And they basically get stuck there. The next kaiju I have is a book called Night of the Living Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is one of the only Stephen Graham Jones that I actually like. In this book, a mannequin comes to life. It ends up eating Miracle Grow out of a shed and ends up a giant monster. It's a really short book, so that's all I'm going to say. Just go into it knowing that, and it's a wild one. All right, so the next monsters that I'm going to do recommendations for are going to be zombies. So the first zombie book that I have is World War Z by Max Brooks. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's told in a documentary style, so it's not really told. It's told linearly, but it's not told in one continuous story. It's told in interviews that the main character compiles. It is quite different from the movie, so if you haven't read the book but you've watched the movie, I do recommend reading the book. It actually is pretty good. All right, and then the second zombie book I have is Rust Colored Rain by Otto Schaefer. In this book, there is a red rain, hence the title, that falls, and basically anybody it touches turns into a zombie. They're not sure why. They end up having to investigate it. It's following a couple and them trying to find each other because they were both at work when it happens, and trying to figure out like basically how to survive and how to avoid this rain that is falling. I highly recommend this book. There's a lot of gore in it, but it is really good. And the next book is supposed to be coming out sometime, I believe, in August, and I cannot wait for it. I'm super excited to read it. If you have more recommendations on zombie books, go ahead and put them down below, because I really do love zombie horror. I just haven't read much of it either. All right, next I'm going to do Ghosts. So the first book isn't really a horror book, it's more of a thriller book, but I'm going to include it anyway. It's Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This book was a wild ride. I think it was the first Riley Sager book I ever actually read, and so I didn't see anything coming. I absolutely adored it. I've had many people read it because of how much I liked it. I've gone through and read most of his backlist because I like this book so much. In this book, a woman inherits a house that she thought was sold, that her family had lived in for like a month. When they moved into it, they stayed for not very long, and then they basically ran out screaming one night and never went back. The dad ended up writing a book about the experience, but everybody just thought that it was, fake, ghosts don't exist, things like that. So she goes back to fix up the house to try to sell it, and see what was so terrifying about the house and why they had to run out of the house screaming in the middle of the night and never go back. The next book that I have is Linghun by Ai Zhang. This book is about a town where the houses that you stay in can bring back a dead loved one, and then you're able to basically spend extra time with them, like they're in a ghost form, but like you're able to like touch them and everything. In this book, the main character, her family gets one of these houses, and they try to bring back her brother. And she's able, like, they're able to see the brother and everything, but the girl doesn't want to stay there because she just basically is feeling neglected. So it's about her trying to escape and not be around like the ghostly presence of her brother. It's also about another character that in it is called a lingerer, which is basically somebody who wants one of the houses, and so he basically sleeps on her lawn waiting for them to want to sell the house so that he can try to win the auction to be able to get it. All right, and then the last book is actually a series, but I'm going to hold up the first book. It's actually YA. It is the Asylum series by Madeline Rue. This book is about a haunted asylum, as you would guess. Basically, they turn a old asylum into like a dorm, and this girl who's going for like a college prep program is basically being haunted by the old patients of the asylum. The whole series goes over the whole history of like the asylum and different things. The whole series is really good, and these books actually have pictures in them that make it just a little extra spooky. All right, and then last but not least is my favorite subgenre, because I love woodsy kind of horror, isolation sort of things, and I love creature features. So they are wooded creatures, bigfoots, wraiths, things like that. I put them all together because they all take place in woods or forests. The first book that I'm going to talk about, to get it out of the way because everybody knows it's coming, is Devolution by Max Brooks. This is about a woman and her husband who go and live in a little town that is like futuristic sort of town where everything gets flown in by drone and things, and it's set in the Pacific Northwest, like right under Mount Rainier, which is a volcano for those of you who don't know, and the volcano erupts and Bigfoots start attacking. Basically, it's just a whole bunch of fun. It's told in kind of a found footage format. It is told through a couple of interviews, but the majority of it is through the main character's journals that she writes, and talks about like basically what's happening the whole time with the whole group of people who live in this like tiny town of like 5 homes. Next is going to be Hunted by Darcy Coates. This book is about a group of friends who go to try to save a girl who went missing in the woods. They don't know what happened to her. Nobody can find her. And for whatever reason, the friends decide, hey, we should go and try to find them and not leave it to the rangers to go and find. So they go get a whole bunch of supplies, and then they go in the woods trying to find their friend. So in this book, it's told through a bunch of different perspectives, including the police that are trying to find the girl herself. All of the friends have different points of view, and it's basically them trying to survive in the woods and getting all turned around and trying to figure out what's happening, and then they find out that they are being followed or hunted. The next book that I have actually read recently is Clawheart Mountain by David Opegard. This book was amazing. I was so happy when I read it. There is a group of friends who basically don't have anything else to do right before they go back to school, so they go to one of the friends' house, like their vacation house, because they're like super rich. It takes place in Colorado, and on their way there, they find a wrecked armored vehicle, like armored truck, and they find $15 million inside, and they steal the money, and the people who own the armored vehicle are basically going after them. The police are going after them, and there is a monster on the mountain that is going after them. It's a wild ride. You don't know who's going to be the one to survive, if any of them. You don't know who's going to be the one killing, whether it's going to be the people going after the kids, whether it's going to be the monster, if the police officers are going to die. It was just a wild ride. I love this book. I don't know why it took me so long to finally read it, but I'm glad that I did. All right, and then the next one that I'm going to talk about is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This book is about a girl and her husband that lives secluded on a mountain, They never see anybody there ever. Like, it's been years since she's seen another person, until one day, randomly, there's a group of 3 or 4 people who just happen to be on the mountain, and they run into them, and they all are looking for something that has been like making a lot of noise, wreaking havoc on the mountain. It is a story where the main female character is trying really hard to survive not just the monster on the mountain, but her husband, who is also a monster, which you end up learning about. Her trying to team with the rest of the people that are on the mountain to try to survive until they're able to get off. And not everybody makes it. All right, so I have 2 more books. One is the one that I don't particularly care for, but the one that I do like is Our Father's Burden by William F. Gray. This book is about a group of friends who their fathers all die within like a year and a half of each other due to different circumstances, cancer, unaliving themselves, different things like that. And they all get letters from their fathers telling them that they need to go on their annual camping trip, and that they will basically learn more once they're on the camping trip. And then there are a bunch of tapes that one of the fathers leaves with one of the sons for them to play once they get to the campsite. So in this, they end up finding out about the father's burden, hence the title, and that there is a monster on the mountainside campsite with them, and it is them trying to survive and them trying to figure out what their fathers exactly were doing and why they were doing it. All right, and then the last book, and the one that I don't really care for, I actually don't like it at all, is The Woodkin by Alexander James. I know some people might like this book. I had really high hopes for this. It's about somebody who's hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. He ends up losing all of his food and supplies and things. An animal actually gets into it and eats all of it. And he runs across a couple of people who are also hiking the trail and asks them for directions to the nearest town. He goes to the town, resupplies, and then goes back to finish hiking. And it is the story of him hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and what happens to him. This has a sort of culty vibe to it and sort of situation that I was not expecting. Had I have expected it, I might have liked it more, but it is not anything like what I thought it was going to be, and I just was not a fan of it. I didn't find it, having been like being the kind of person I am where I just don't trust people. Like, I never would have trusted anybody like in the town or anything. So like, I don't know if that sparked my dislike of it or what, but I wasn't a fan. But if you do like woodsy, culty sort of books, this one might be for you. All right, so those were all of my monster horror book recommendations. I hope there were a few of them that maybe you hadn't heard of before, or that you had heard of before but you weren't sold on. Maybe I was able to convince you to give them a try. If you do read any of them, come back and let me know. If you have any recommendations for horror books that involve monsters, especially bigfoots because they're my favorite, but also any of these monsters because obviously some of them I am lacking in recommendations for, go ahead and leave the recommendations down below. Like and subscribe if you want to, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.